Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the FantasyPros Football Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Harris. You can find me on Twitter at DanHarris80. It is our DFS show, but it is also Christmas week. Mike Tagliere was unable to make it, but we got like our 8th best fill-in. It's Joe Pisapia. You know him, author of the best-selling Fantasy Black Book series, Sports Grid Fantasy Game Day host of the Black Book Pod, Line Star. Too many things. I don't even like listing them. You can find him on Twitter at his name, Joe Pisapia 17. Joe, thank you for filling in today.
Yeah, you're welcome. I don't know where Tagliere is. I guess he's making the Christmas cookies or he's busy. I don't know. Maybe he gets too much eggnog last night, but that's okay, Mike. I'm going to step in when you're not available and you're doing whatever Christmas stuff you're doing. And I'm happy to talk a little DFS with you today because there's still 2 weeks of main slate left, and that's exciting to me.
Well, if we know one thing about Tags, it's that he tries whatever he can to get out of work. So that's what he's doing. I mean, the guy barely does anything.
Yeah,
I'm telling you,
that guy hates to work.
He hates to work. Never does anything.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, look, I realize not everybody necessarily plays DFS. A lot of people just like season-long fantasy. But at this point, I don't know. You've got 2, 3, 4 people, however many left in your season-long leagues who are actually playing for something, whether you're playing for your third-place game or other than that. So have some interest in football this week and next week and play DFS. It's a ton of fun, even if you're a casual player. If you're a serious player, we're here to help everyone. So our usual DFS show plan, we're going to start with our favorite pricier cash game play at each position. We'll discuss a couple of cash game value plays at each position. We'll do one GPP gamble at each position, a quick discussion of a defense that we like, and then a stack of the week and our lock of the week. But before we get into it, let me tell you about the Daily Juice podcast. As you might expect from its name, Daily, it is a 15-minute podcast that's there every morning when you wake up, talking about the best sports gambling plays of the day. It's hosted by Matt Peralt, who you guys probably know from Betting Pros, longtime radio host from Vegas. He touches on everything, the NFL, of course, but basketball is back, so he does that. College football, college basketball, MMA, everything you've got. Anywhere you listen to podcasts or on bettingpros.com/Daily Juice. Again, that is the Daily Juice podcast. All right, let's get to your favorite pricier cash game play of the weekend. Go ahead, Joe. Start us off at running back.
Well, first off, just to let everybody know, those of you who are playing this week, who for the first time all year, you've also got that Saturday slate, which is odd. So it's almost like the main slate this week is sort of like a bye week because you've got six teams that aren't going to be on there. So it's a little bit different in that term. So that's also something that's interesting to play this weekend as well, because you do have those isolated games, and I think there's some good value there, including, since we're talking about cash, going up and paying up for Kyler Murray, paying up for Hopkins. And then there's a lot of value there because it looks like Jones isn't going to play. You can go to that Detroit-Tampa game and get some value depending on what's going on with Detroit's COVID issues and stuff like that. But on the main slate for quarterback, for me, it's Lamar. And it's because he's been unleashed these last few weeks. It's just the right time here where he is continuing to roll. This is getting back to basics of this offense. This is getting back to what made them successful last year. And I think in a way it's been good for Baltimore to be chasing. I think last year when they were kind of at the top, they got a little complacent, and then it carried over into this season, and then they kind of woken up and they realized, look, there's limited things that they can do right now with this wide receiver core. So the best thing you can do is just put the ball in Lamar Jackson's hands and let him make plays. And maybe that was something they were, not ready to do in week 6 or week 7, but they're ready to do it in the last few weeks. And that's good news because the guy has huge rushing touchdown equity, huge upside in terms of rushing yards, and he's been throwing some touchdown passes as well. So I would keep that in mind for Lamar. That's my quarterback.
So I don't know if you're either DraftKings or FanDuel. So you prefer, are you DraftKings, I assume?
I play both. I play both, and I cover both on Line Star. And I think on both sides this week, that it's one of those spots where I think you can make it work both ways.
That's exactly what I was gonna ask, because the price difference is very close on both. On DraftKings, it's $8,000 for Lamar Jackson, $8,500 for Patrick Mahomes, and on FanDuel, it's $8,800 for Lamar Jackson, $9,400 for Patrick Mahomes. So in both situations, you prefer the $500-$600 discount then to Mahomes, who's going up against Atlanta without obviously his top running back, even though they don't rely on the run.
Well, look, here's the thing with that. I mean, Mahomes is always a great play, but in terms of what's that separator? Like, what's the $500 difference on DK is look, you can understand if you want to go to Mahomes. I've gone to Mahomes a couple times this year, not much, but I mean, for me, I will just stand back just a little bit because I think Lamar's ceiling is just as high as Mahomes potentially this week. So I think that's more to the point for me. So that little bit of savings does make a huge difference, especially when you're trying to find those wide receivers or that defense that you like for a couple $100 more, or whatever that is. So yeah, for me at the quarterback, there's marginal this week for me about where they're going to, separate themselves. So I would rather just take that little bit of a discount with Lamar.
Yeah. All right. I think that is totally fair. I think Lamar is a great option this week without question. I do think that, especially on FanDuel, which I find it's a lot easier to kind of make that, Tags and I joke about this all the time. On FanDuel, it's a lot easier to make that a couple of very big purchases because there are always one or two guys that are so easy. You can make it work with a lot of higher priced guys, more so, in my opinion, than you can do on DraftKings.
FanDuel's always a little looser in that sense.
Correct.
But the looseness also makes it hard because you're then competing against higher pay lines. So there's there's a little bit of give and take there because with the half point PPR, I always tell people on my podcast, I say you always want to lean towards the guys who have touchdown equity. That's what you're really looking for, especially the guys in quarterback with rushing touchdown equity. It's why Kyler was such a great buy in the beginning of the season, and why Jalen Hurts was the last few weeks. And you could see Hurts has gone from like a 6,200 quarterback on FanDuel to an 8,200 quarterback over a week. So, and rightfully so. I mean, that's the adjustment that should be made.
Yep. Yeah, I agree with you there. Okay, let's go to the running back position, Joe. Who do you like as your pricier cash game play at running back?
Well, I think the best thing that could have happened is, for the Jets to have won and Cleveland see that not sleepwalk through this next game. So for me, if I'm going to pay up for a running back all the way to the top, I'm not going to go take the chance with McCaffrey. We'll see whether or not he plays or not, but I will go with Chubb. I just think that, Chubb has just been fantastic. And you don't have a lot of premium running backs on this main slate.
Right.
There's no Derrick Henry on this slate, no Dalvin Cook on this slate because he's playing on Christmas. So it's a little bit different than you're normally used to. Like I said, Sunday's kind of like a bye week in a lot of ways. So there are a few other guys in this mix, but if you're going to pay up for the one guy, I think the $9,000 Nick Chubb is reasonable, that you're going to get touchdown equity. You're going to get a fair amount of carries. And look, I don't think the Jets have an answer necessarily for Nick Chubb. And by the way, my condolences to you as a Jet fan for winning.
I can't. I'm not ready to talk about it yet.
I know. It's okay. It's okay.
I'm not. It's going to be
years. I feel like
years.
this is a Goodwill Hunting where I should just hug you and say it's not your fault.
I know my father legitimately said like his favorite saying was that the Jets somehow find every year like a new way to break your heart, which you didn't think was possible anymore. Like I figured we had run the gamut, but yeah,
still more.
So let's just very briefly though. I mean, because again, this is something that Tags harps on every year, like. In season-long leagues, forget about DFS for a minute. Season-long leagues, Tags is always lower on the running backs who are facing the Jets because as terrible as they have been, other than this game against the Rams, their run defense is actually pretty decent. For you, you don't care about it. It doesn't matter because the volume's going to be there with Chubb or Chubb's too good. Doesn't really matter for you at all.
It's that combination and also what the slate looks like. See, that thinking is not wrong, but you also then have to apply it to the slate itself. So, we'll talk about Montgomery in a bit, but after him, I mean, you're taking a huge dart throw on a guy like Miles Sanders. You're taking, Kareem Hunt is there against the Jets this week as well. Ekeler is good, but we'll talk with him a little bit later. He comes with some risk this week. And as good as Pollard was last week, if he should play again, the Eagles matchup is not too enticing either. So if I am going to pay up for running back, there's the sure thing of at least I know what I'm getting points-wise. Now, the problem is it hard against the Jets for him to go 3x value? Yes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the Cleveland Browns right now are playing their best football, and they're running that play action really well, and that is all stemming from getting Nick Chubb involved. So at least in this case, for me, is a huge volume play where he's going to be so involved in the offense, and what the upside is, and he can break a run. And look, I know the Jets won last week, but let's not get crazy here. Yep. Okay, they still give up 30-something points to Vegas a couple weeks ago. I mean, this is a team that they can still give up a ton of points. So I just want to point that out to everybody.
No, I do think, hopefully, anyway, that the game script will be positive for the Browns and they'll be able to run the ball. And, I mean, I think the point that you're making, though, above all, Joe, is that this slate, because of the way the games have broken down, it's just terrible. You mentioned it. The third highest priced running back on the slate is Dave Montgomery. And kudos to Dave Montgomery. He's been...
Oh, yeah. And I can't wait to talk about him. Yep. But at the same time, it's only until the last few weeks with Montgomery, with Taylor, with Cam Akers before he got hurt, that there was even any sort of mid-range value outside of James Robinson, because all year it was like you either paid to the top for the Derrick Henrys of the world, which is nothing wrong with that, or you go to the other end and you're trying to take shots on the Wayne Gallmans of the world, and that worked for a while too. But that in between, it just what I like to call the old school Mark Ingram running back from 3 or 4 years ago, he has not existed. The $7,500 back that was a good ROI, he hasn't been there most of the year, especially on FanDuel.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is really, for me, I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do. I don't think I'm going to wind up paying up for running back this week. I mean, we'll
I'm
talk
not
about
either,
it later.
but if I did, that's the way I'd go.
Again, this is a point I make pretty much every show, which is this is what we do. This is the way I like to frame the show, which is talk about your favorite pricier cash game play of the day, and we give that option to the extent you're going to take that option. But oftentimes, we're not going to take that option. I think this is a week to
You
not
can
take
make
that.
it work this week because this week there is a grouping of wide receivers that's undervalued slightly that I think have a better floor than people realize. So you can make that work if you were really if you hate the running back position even more than we do this week, and you're like, okay, I really just want to get Chubb in there and play cash in a couple lineups. That's fine.
Yep. All right, let's go to wide receiver here. Favorite pricier cash game play of the Sunday slate.
Well, and this is a funny one too because he is pricey, but he's not all the way up at the top, and I think that's part of the reasoning for me. Look, you could certainly always make the case for Tyreek Hill. Calvin Ridley's played like a wide receiver one all year. He's been brilliant, but Allen Robinson to me against Jacksonville is that guy where I know exactly what I'm getting, and at 77 on DK, I think that's a really fair price for what he's been doing. The guy's just been so stunningly good for so long. It's just unbelievable to me with such spotty quarterback play throughout his career. And I think on both sides, I think it's a very fair cost for him. So for me, I think that he's the guy that I would pay up for because I'm pretty sure against Jacksonville, he's going to get his looks. He's going to be part of this offense. And, I love this matchup for the Bears, and at 75 over on FanDuel, it's still a good price as well.
Yeah, he actually was the guy who popped out to me. Again, if you have the bankroll to do it and you want to pay up for Tyreek Hill at 9,400, I mean, kudos to you. And again, you might be able to get away with that on FanDuel in particular. But yeah, Robinson is the guy in this matchup against Jacksonville, 7,500. Again, he's priced right around DK Metcalf. There's no way, just because of the matchup with the Rams and everything like that. I don't really want to do it for Ridley either, even though he's 8,700, $1,200 more. Tags and I, again, this week have, kind of debated the KC pass defense and how good it actually is. But still, at this point, against Jacksonville,
if Ridley were at home, I'd like it more. I like him a little bit more in that building.
No, that makes total sense. But Robinson, again, Trubisky, for the most part, has been playing well. And Robinson is just, he's just so safe each and every week, just the volume that he's getting and everything like that. So, yeah, he was the guy who popped to me on FanDuel as well. Again, 7,500, 7,600 on DK. So if you're paying up a wide receiver, I think we're in agreement. That's where we'd go. How about tight end here, Joe? Who do you like?
Well, there's only one guy to pay up for, and it's Kelce. And you can make the case for, especially against Atlanta, who's terrible against the tight end. So this is where all things converge. And there's a part of me also, this is why I would fade a little bit from Tyreek Hill, because once again, there's just there's even worse options at tight end than there are at running back. There's a few guys out there, but if you want the separator, it's Kelce.
Yeah.
This is the guy who, in the last 6 seasons, he's the only guy that has 1,000 yards receiving. That's it. In the last 6 years, it's him. He's by himself. And that means you're paying for a high floor every week, and you also have the high ceiling because of the game against Atlanta. And if you're talking about the run game being injured, well, to me, Kelce's how you really move the chains, not Tyreek Hill. So that to me is what you want. That's going to be the replacement guy, so to speak, in terms of possession. Let's move the chains. Let's get 8 yards here, 6 yards there. And of course he has the big play in the red zone acumen as well. So Kelce's just a great play all the way around. And if you're going to pair him with Mahomes, it's a little bit cheaper than pairing him with Tyreek Hill, but you're also separating yourself quite a bit at the tight end position too, because there's so many swings and misses at tight end. If you hit, it's great, and it's going to be the difference maker in some tournaments. But in cash game, look, Kelce is certainly a guy that I think is just, at this point, you don't need me to tell you that Travis Kelce is good at football, because he is.
So, the million-dollar question is, Joe, given the fact he's 8,500 on DraftKings, the next highest tight end, Mark Andrews, is 5,700. The next highest tight end is 4,900. When you're building your cash game lineups, do you think you'll be paying up for Kelce this week?
Well, I'll tell you what, there's value at quarterback this week with guys like Mayfield. There's some value, like I said, at wide receiver, some of the guys we're going to get to. So you can do it quite comfortably, but you're going to have to, take a few shots at running back more based on matchup than about talent. And that's okay. That's not a bad recipe necessarily. But look, I think at this point, when you're looking at that tight end landscape too, even though Mark Andrews has been a little bit better recently, and Logan Thomas has been very good, a little bit of a question mark with Washington this week about what's going on there, and who's healthy and who's not. So, there's a little bit of unknown there. Now, I think Logan Thomas is a perfectly good way to go about things. I think Goddard's a good way to go about things too, because he could have had a touchdown in that game too that didn't happen. But I think that if you're going to go and break the bank, I'm going to break the bank for the guy who is the legit game changer, who I know is going to just get me points. And then I'll find some possession wide receivers, some other guys in there that I know have a good floor at least. And they think that's an okay way to build a cash game lineup this week.
All right, well, let's find some guys who we can save a little money on here and go to cash game value plays. Let's start at quarterback then, Joe. Who do you got? Who are you looking to, who's a value play for you at quarterback?
I'll tell you what, in cash game, there's a little bit of a value, I think, with Jalen Hurts. Not a lot, but a little. Whereas it's that same kind of thing with Lamar and those elite rushing quarterbacks, but it's not quite the same price yet. He's only $7K over on DK as opposed to Lamar, who's $1,000 more. So you can get a similar kind of performance, I think, out of Jalen Hurts, especially against Dallas. So that's a way that I would go about that. I think that's a guy that you would keep an eye on there. And outside of him, it's kind of funny because then that next drop-off is this other tier that's more of a GPP class, in my opinion. But Hurts, because he has that rushing ability, that's going to get you an extra, 5 points somewhere around there. And then if he has a rushing touchdown, that's an extra 6, right? So that's enough for me to look at that and say, you know what, I feel good about him in cash because of the matchup, because they have that little bit of spark going right now. And yeah, when you get more film on these guys, yes, it becomes a little bit more difficult for them to be successful. However, I think what Hurts is doing right now is working, and Dallas has shown you, despite the fact that they won a game last week, all year they've just been a sieve defensively. So I would definitely go with Hurts this week. I think that's a guy you could still go with.
They wasted no time bumping his price up, which is great. I mean, he is
and they should.
They should.
And that tells you a lot too. Whenever you see these adjustments or the disparity between two sites, it's always something to keep an eye on because that means that one of them is wrong. Right? So if you see like a guy who's like way different in terms of where they are the rest of the pack on let's say a DraftKings as opposed to a FanDuel or vice versa, that's something that always we talk about on my podcast for Line Star is that recognizing that because having that in one of those spots where it's cheaper could be a difference maker because one site's telling you it's a really good matchup, the other one's not as happy about it. Well, one's right and one's wrong. Take a shot somewhere because that could be a difference maker.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I am in agreement with you, at least in cash games. I mean, I think, look, if I can afford Mahomes, I might be willing to do it. Lamar Jackson is a great option, but other than that, it's Hurts. It's going to be one of those three guys probably this week for at least cash game, just to have the safe floor. In GPP, it's a whole different story, which we'll talk about in a bit, but I agree with you there. Let's go to running back, Joe. Who's a cash game value play at the position?
It's my boy David Montgomery. I can't believe Tags is in here to talk about the Bears. I mean,
Tags is the two of these guys, Yates and Tags. They just fight though because Yates is the optimistic one and Tags is the pessimistic one. So to get them together, it's like oil and water. It doesn't work.
The funny part to me is that I can't believe this is where we're at, but we are. I methink the guy's got 550 yards in 4 games. The guy since week 10 or something like that, or week 12, he's been the RB1. I think it was week 12. Since week 12, he's been RB1. The guy's been very consistent. It's a great matchup against Jacksonville. There's no reason not to go this route. And it's got risk like every other running back has risk. But when you look at the rest of the board, this is clearly the best ROI. And I think this is a play that, at 78 on FanDuel is still a huge discount, in my opinion, because of what he can offer touchdown equity-wise and because he has broken some big runs, and that is the big difference maker too, right? Especially in the half-point PPR when you can really rack up the big yardage total. So you put that combination in with the price. I love that the price hasn't crossed 8 yet on FanDuel. I think it's great. 7,800, sign me up. And when you look at the rest of the slate, to me, it's a no-brainer. And I don't care. We talk about the good chalk all the time. There's good chalk and bad chalk. This is the good chalk. If it fails, it fails. But if you look at the lineups that win these GPPs and score very well in cash, they're chalky. They're just chalky lineups with that one-off defense or that one-off tight end. That's the big separator in terms of where you get that bounce or that third wide receiver. You have to get into the dance first. And I think that's why Montgomery I like across the board in contests this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, we're talking about him as a value, and he is the third highest running back on both sites, but that is a value at the 7,800.
Yeah, but he's not like he's
right. 7,700.
A couple of weeks ago we had we had Dalvin Cook at 10-2.
Right.
Derrick Henry at 10-5, and then Chubb was up to 9-5. I mean, there's a lot of guys up the top. This week, the way the schedule shakes out, it's a little different.
Trust me, I'm not at all casting.
No complaint.
I'm not complaining.
No complaining. We're not complaining.
What I'm saying is that one of the reasons why it's a value is because, you take out Derrick Henry, who's not on the slate, and you take out Alvin Kamara, who's not on the slate. Montgomery is the top running back for me on the way. Forget about Cook. I'd prefer him over Cook. I'm telling, if you have a half PPR league, season-long leagues, I'm taking him over Cook this week, I think, at least on my initial projections. So Yeah, he's the guy. And again, as you said, yeah, he might be the third highest priced guy, which again, I think is actually undervalued on the slate. But regardless, it's only 77 or 7,800. So it's not as if you have to absolutely destroy your bankroll to try to fit him in the lineup. Now, Joe, a lot of guys ask for cash game. They're like, all right, well, I want to pay up for Kelce. I want to pay up for, Mahomes or Lamar Jackson, or I want to pay up for Tyreek Hill. Are there any like cheaper guys? And again, value play is value play. Doesn't matter if it's on the high end or in the low end. Are there any less expensive guys that you feel like offer you that pretty high floor that you think offers a pretty decent value at running back this week?
At running back, the only other guy I think you can kind of get into that conversation with is probably Ekeler. Once again, because I think of what they're trying to do, and especially with that wide receiving core not working at 100%, Denver likes to kind of bring you down to their level a little bit and play in the mud a little bit. That's just kind of their mode. So I think that's another guy, but he comes with a little bit of risk. Now he's cheaper. He's only 7K, but I think you have you don't have the usage problem. He's part of the offense. He's going to touch the football. He can get receptions too. So I think that's kind of my pivot of that next guy that I have that would really pop to me right away. But other than that, it is very tricky. I mean, with Robinson out, with Ezekiel Elliott, not 100%, not that he's been any good anyway. I mean, it's just kind of a wasteland. You're just kind of throwing darts at certain guys. And I think that I'd rather go with the volume of Ekeler and solidify that floor, especially in cash. But again, my concern with him is the touchdown equity, and it's a little bit less than a guy like Montgomery.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, they've showed that they're going to be careful with any of these guys when they're battling injuries, as we saw Thursday, which probably cost a lot of fantasy managers in their season-long leagues a trip to the finals. Let's go to wide receiver here, Joe. Who's a value play in cash game for you?
Well, there's two guys right around the same price this week for me that I think are very good investments. And one of them is, of course, Robert Woods. Just because, that matchup against Seattle is a very good one. I'm sure the Rams got read the riot act the last few days. I'm sure they're embarrassed. And look, Robert Woods not only is going to catch the football, but he's going to be involved in different ways in the offense too. He's going to, get a couple carries, or they'll run that jet sweep with him. So to me, that's a guy that has a lot of upside. And then on the same kind of tip, that same usage feel, you got Landry with the Cleveland Browns too, who's been very solid lately. So I think those are two guys that you kind of look at and you say, okay, this is a good situation here, good matchup. Let's play the matchup. Let's play the trend. And when those two things converge with a good price that's somewhere, in that 7K range, or in this case for these guys, I mean, Landry's just 6.5, which I think is a terrific value over on the FanDuel side. I think those guys really kind of stick out to me on DraftKings. Obviously, different price structure there, but Woods is 7K, so a little bit cheaper than Allen Robinson, but I think he offers just as much potential upside, so you could save a little bit of money there. Those are the two guys that I'd be looking at. And you know what? As much as I'd love to start looking at the Steelers, I have all kinds of concerns with the Steelers offense right now, and the offensive line, more importantly.
Yeah, so that is something, because are you avoiding the Steelers entirely? Because a lot of times, especially Diontae Johnson in particular, people were always willing to go after. Are you avoiding everything that's going on that team?
Here's my, I think Diontae is still always a good setup, because they can't run the football right now, so he is that Wes Welker, Julian Edelman guy that's gonna catch a million balls and move it one stick at a time. But my concern is not the drops. My concern is Roethlisberger's health, because he hasn't looked the same in the pocket since that Cowboy game when he got hurt with that knee, and I don't think anybody's really talking about that enough. At least I haven't heard anyone talk about it. And then you add in the PFF grades for the offensive line this year that have not been great, especially with Pouncey. And you saw that miscommunication with the snap on Monday night. And, it's just he's not quite the same guy that he was, or at least not this year. So maybe it's an injury for him. I don't know. But I know there's enough. And when you put that in a combination with the Indianapolis front with Buckner, and you've got Leonard playing and running amok there, it's going to be a tough day at the office, I think, for the Steelers. They really do. They could, get home and get right, of course. But you know what? This was supposed to be the get-right game against an inferior, and they know it too, an inferior Cincinnati Bengal team. They should have wiped the floor with them. And you know what? They tried in the second half to turn it on, and they couldn't. So I think this is a week where, it very well might happen, and maybe you're going to play against and be contrarian and have a little bit of juju, or have some Diontae Johnson shares, or maybe even Claypool, who all have really good values on DK, and that they're going to throw the ball a ton. But I got to tell you, there's some risk in there too.
Yeah, I just can't do it. I just can't do it. I've done it too many times at this point. The Steelers look broken. in every single possible way that they could be broken. And, maybe this is sort of, and this is more of a sports betting thing. It's like, I feel like the Mike Tomlin spot is the nobody believes in us, everybody's against us, rah. Like, that's where I feel like the Steelers generally have played their best football, but I just don't think they have it right now. Whether or not it is Roethlisberger, and again, as we talked about it, the offensive line can't get any push whatsoever. So I think with that, they can't run the ball, and everybody knows what they're doing now.
Right.
Ben can't go with pressure, and so they're just crowding. They don't need to worry about the receivers going deep on them. So I agree. That's kind of where we are. Let's go to tight end at this point. Who's a cash game value play for you?
Logan Thomas. No matter who's playing quarterback, it seems like it doesn't matter. Except as long as his name isn't Kyle Allen, it seems like we're okay with Logan Thomas. And this is another one where you're looking for tight ends who have some upside, but also are part of the offense. And I think they've done a really good job in the last few weeks of recognizing Logan Thomas's importance to this offense. And it's been a little bit at the expense at times of Terry McLaurin. But I think what's also happening is you're seeing defenses saying, look, we need to stop Terry McLaurin. And if we could stop him, then we'll see if you could beat us with the rest of the pieces. And the beneficiaries of that have been McKissick and Logan Thomas. And I think that's something that opposing defenses are comfortable with having happen. But from a DFS point, I'm comfortable with having Logan Thomas because I still feel like people don't give him enough respect. So that's the guy for me where I think in cash, maybe a little bit higher floor than Goedert because you just don't know exactly what's going to go on with that Eagles offense because you have a more dynamic quarterback playing right now.
Right.
But Logan Thomas, to me, I think is a good value if you're going to get off that board. Andrews is fine too. There's no doubt about that. And as you pointed out, when you go from Kelce, the next guy is a huge drop off.
Right.
Andrews is also perfectly fine. But if you want to save even a little bit more, I think you can go to Logan Thomas and still kind of get basically a similar point total at the end of the day.
So if you're on DK, you would prefer the 4,900 for Logan Thomas rather than the pretty significant discount of 3,600 to Goedert.
In cash, yes. Because the only thing that continues to worry me is when you're playing against Dallas, they don't cover very well. So maybe this is an opportunity for the Greg Wards or the, or whoever else is going to be alive in that wide receiving court to step up and have a good game. There's that opportunity. Plus, now that you have a quarterback who is taking the points into his own hands, which is great for DFS, but not always great for everybody else. Like, it's great with Kyler Murray because it's Hopkins.
Right.
That's fine. But it makes all the other guys really spotty. You had that month of Christian Kirk, then you had a month of Kenyon Drake, and now it's back to just Kyler Murray. So it's kind of difficult to gauge. So that, to me, in DFS is something I don't like to put my money on. It's more of a tournament play where I'll take that savings and then I'll go spend up elsewhere, because if Goddard does have that good game, that's a positive and it's a huge return. But for me, I'm going to just kind of hedge my bet a little bit, and I'm going to go with Logan Thomas this week.
All right, let's go to GPPs. That's where everybody loves to go, Joe.
Yeah.
That's where they want to do it. Let's go. Let's gamble. Let's get start at the quarterback position. Who's your guy?
Well, I got two guys. I got Trubisky, who I can't believe I'm here. I feel almost dirty, with this whole Bears thing that I've been on. And I've been doing this for the last couple of weeks on the show, and we were very careful. Now the good news is, we were very much into the Houston game. He had a good game there. Last week was a little underwhelming, not terrible. We've been on that Phillip Rivers train quite a bit the last few weeks too. But with the Steelers being angry Steelers or whatever, I'm going to back off that. But the other guy to me that I just think is not getting enough credit is Baker Mayfield.
Yeah.
And at 6,100 against the Jets, once again, we're talking about the point totals here. I mean, on DK, 34, 34, 20 last 3 weeks, and he didn't have to do much against the Giants. So if the Jets are more competitive, that's good in the sense because it's going to make Baker Mayfield continue to push the ball downfield. And Baker Mayfield looks comfortable. He is playing his best football in the NFL. And a lot of it is because you're taking away the decision-making process for him. You're running those play action passes where he's got that one target to focus on. So he doesn't have to sit back in the pocket and try to read the defense and make that throw that he could have made in college and gotten away with, but you can't get away with in the pros.
Right.
He's not doing that anymore because they're taking that away from him, and it's brilliant. And what it's done is it's made him more confident that the one or two times he's asked to do that in the game, he's been able to do a better job of that because I think opposing defenses now are on their heels a little bit. So Baker Mayfield, to me, at 6,100, I think is a really good investment on DK this week.
Let me ask you something, Joe, because Mayfield doesn't just strike me as a tournament play. I personally would feel – I'm not going to do it on FanDuel because –
I agree. I think you can get away with it too.
In cash.
In fact, that's how if you want to get –
Yes.
If you don't want to go with Mahomes and you want to but you still want Kelce, Baker Mayfield's a way to make that work.
Yeah. I was thinking that because I almost mentioned him during cash. I was like, I'm sure you mentioned sort of, you alluded to the fact that we'd be talking about him later, so I figured you'd bring him up in the GPP. On FanDuel, look, unless you're absolutely strapped for cash, I'm going to probably pay the $600 more to get to Jalen Hurts in a cash game just because I feel safer about it. But realistically, on DraftKings, there's a bigger difference. On FanDuel, even so, if I need to, I feel totally confident with Baker. I mean, we are talking about the fact that we are in week 16 of the NFL season, and I am completely confident in David Montgomery and Baker Mayfield. Like, that's where we are right now.
It's where we are, and we have to accept it.
Yep.
But you're absolutely right, and I think Baker Mayfield is, like you said, I think a vibe, especially viable on DK. It's a better play on DraftKings because when you start to then look at the field of where he is, like you're saying, you're then dealing with Jalen Hurts and, the same price range for a couple $100 more. You're up to the Deshaun Watsons and the Lamar Jacksons. And it's not to say that he can't keep pace statistically with them right now in this matchup against the Jets, but you also then have to, look, if you could get that discount and it works out, which I think it will, it's a huge difference maker. And I just think right now it's a better DK play than a FanDuel play.
Yeah, well, I agree with that completely on DK rather than FanDuel. As someone with a lot of action on Stefanski for Coach of the Year, I hope
me too. You and me both. I put it down a couple weeks ago and it was 11-1.
Oh, but I got it before the season, 20-1. Baby, we did a lot of research. We'll talk about it off air. We did a lot of research into Coach of the Year. He was like,
we hit on that. You and I we're gonna go on vacation.
Absolutely, we'll go on vacation.
All inclusive
in like 2 years. We're allowed to. All right, so let's get to running back. Joe, who's the GPP play for you?
GPP running back, McKissick on DK especially. And on FanDuel, I will go back to Ekeler into that grouping. And then the other guy I would throw out there is Gio Bernard against Houston. And it's not because necessarily he had a really good game or whatever that was, but against Dallas, he had that fumble and then they kind of went away from him. And they rewarded him in this game with 25 carries and he bounced back huge. He had a great game. I don't know how much longer Gio Bernard's going to play. I just want his mustache to hang around because that mustache is just phenomenal. So I'm going to put some money in the mustache this week because I think against Houston, Houston's averaging 150 yards a game given up to running backs. I mean, it's just absurd. Yeah. And this is why I keep saying Derrick Henry can get to 2K because you looked at the schedule and he had Detroit, Green Bay, and Houston left. And I'm like, Houston at week 17, they don't play defense already. Week 17, do you think anybody's going to be out there trying to stop this guy? What are you, crazy? They're all going to be on a plane in the third quarter. But McKissick, especially on DK, I know the price has gone up a little bit, but still it's not pricey. It's $6,400.
Yeah.
Him and Bernard are two guys, and Bernard's just 48. I mean, he's like free square. Free square, great matchup. I know the Bengals aren't very good, but you know what? You don't have to be very good to get some points at 4,800 return. Again, this is more of a DraftKings play where you have to be a little bit more careful with your money on FanDuel when it comes to these lower end running backs. So for me, it's going to be more of you can go with Bernard. It's fine because of Houston, but I think guys like Ekeler kind of fit that 7K mold. Right? Okay, I feel pretty good about this guy. He's not super cheap, but I got to be honest with you, man. There's just not a lot of super cheap running backs on FanDuel this week to feel good about.
Yeah. No, you're not wrong. And when we're talking about, GPPs, we obviously want to think about their, ownership percentage in terms of how many people are going to be on them. Do you think that Gio is going to be highly owned or McKissick, let's say on DraftKings necessarily? Because of course,
I think Gio will be higher owned on DraftKings than people realize. And McKissick is not a secret, but once again, this is the good chalk. The only other guy, too, especially on the FanDuel side at 6,300, I think has some appeal is J.K. Dobbins. Because what happens is everybody goes to this mode where they go, well, it's Lamar Jackson, so nobody else can get any points. Well, that's just dumb. It's like last week on game day, we had this big discussion about, hey, just because Derrick Henry's slated for a big game doesn't mean Tannehill can't be good, too. Because you go back and look at the game log and you can see it happening. So, sometimes there's what I like to call lazy fantasy, where, it's good analysis, but it's not really good.
Right.
It's just a little too general. So you got to be more specific about these individual teams. And what's happening now is Lamar Jackson running all over the place has opened up things and most importantly, tired out defenses. Because when you're chasing Lamar for 30 yards and then you come back and you hand the ball off to Dobbins, that's tough to deal with. Because you just ran after Lamar Jackson. And it's like having an extra running back on the field at all times. It's very difficult when Lamar's at his peak to stop anybody. Just look at Ingram last year. So I think Dobbins at 63 has some appeal too, and he also has some goal line love too.
Yeah, I do like that call. For me, a guy, again, who kind of jumped out to me was Ekeler, who you mentioned, because I just don't think that he's going to be particularly highly owned in cash game. You mentioned the way in GPPs. Though you mentioned the way Denver does it, he's so, his price at 7K, there's a lot of guys in that area who you might feel more comfortable with, generally speaking, at least on FanDuel. And I think that's a point where you want to pivot to a guy who is going to offer still that high floor, assuming that he's fully healthy. If I get the rep count goodness, can we get, I want a Chargers game where I don't get the entire team is active, but they're on a rep count, or they're going to be limited because I'm just running away. But if not, if he's fully healthy, I think he's a guy who, again, you can pivot to, because I don't think he's going to be particularly highly rostered in GPP. So he's a guy, given his price, which you might be like, it's 7. There are guys around there who I prefer, or I'll pay down for it. You can get him in your GPP lineup on FanDuel at the very least. Let's go to wide receiver, Joe. Who you got for a GPP play there?
All right. You got Rashard Higgins at 4,800, who is another dude who's just putting up crooked numbers the last couple weeks. And I love that. That's what we want to see. And who'd have thought that Odell Beckham would go down and all of a sudden the Browns would really take off, right?
Yep.
Once again, last week, I wouldn't buy too much into it because they just really didn't have to do much. And that game, they kind of sleepwalked through that game a little bit. But I don't think they're going to sleepwalk 2 weeks in a row after watching the Jets spoil the Rams. That was a huge wake-up call. And you would think it would have been a wake-up call for the Steelers, but no, apparently not. Apparently none of them are watching on Sunday.
Well, Joe, don't forget, too, now, with the Steelers losing, though, this is like a division.
Oh, it's huge. It's wide open.
Yes.
And then they play the Steelers in Week 17, which I've been hoping all year that game meant something, because I just think that would be fun to see the upstart Browns against the old guard Steelers in this matchup. And then there's even a possibility, I think, depending on how things work out, where they might play each other then again in the first round of the playoffs, depending on outcomes, which would be crazy, right? Yeah. But Higgins, look, 21 points on DK, 18 last week, obviously down, but still 11 in a down week, not bad. Russell Gage, when Julio Jones is hurt, Russell Gage steps up and he has games. That's another guy for me. He's got double digits. He's got 15 or more 3 weeks in a row without Julio. And I think if you are Kansas City, you've got to find a way to stop Calvin Ridley, which means Gage is going to be open. Gage also can run the football. Gage also can throw the football.
Correct.
I mean, there's a guy with 5,100 salary on DK. He can get you points in all kinds of different ways. And on FanDuel, he's cheap too. He's 58. So these guys are all in that same tier. They're just in that 5K range, or even less on DK in that 4K range. Yep. And the last guy for me is Darnell Mooney, who, if you want to get in on this Jacksonville game in a little clever way, it's a GP pay, multiple entry tournament play only. But I think it has a little bit of appeal because of the matchup in Jacksonville, and because, again, back-to-back weeks, especially, this is more of a DraftKings play. We talk about free squares. He's only 4K. Yep. Darnell Mooney is a 4K wide receiver, allows you to go to Kelce. It allows you, if you would prefer to go to a higher-end running back. Those kind of guys, you find that good free square that can get you 3 times value, and Mooney, I think, can get you 12.
Yep.
All of a sudden, that puts you right in the driver's seat for a bigger ticket item that's very responsible, especially since the high-tier running backs are guys like Montgomery, who's not even 8,000. So I think that is something that you really look at, that kind of pairing that, as good as Robinson is, we talked about him in the beginning, I think when you also look at Darnell Mooney, you go, okay, well, I can get maybe 12 points out of him, still be involved in this game, and then get some pieces for other positions that are kind of weak this particular slate.
All 3 of those recommendations are really, really good. And if you only play DFS and you don't play season long, so you haven't listened to the rest of this week's podcast, just check out the Waiver Wire podcast, because legitimately all 3 of these guys we talked about. No, I mean, but that's a good thing, because we talked about how much we liked them this week. And Joe, in season long, you're talking about, I'm in my championship game, or I'm in my third place game. I have a pretty strong team. What do I really need to be worrying about picking up guys who are widely available? But no, we were all like, oh no, like Higgins, great play this week. Yeah. Gage is actually a guy for GPPs who I might like the most, because I do think in particular, again, this comes from someone like Tags, who is, of course, extremely knowledgeable, plays a ton of DFS. He really does not like Gage this week because of KC. And I disagree for exactly the reasons you said. I'm not penciling him in to throw a touchdown pass necessarily.
No, you can't. But you keep in mind that, look, anything goes with the Falcons right now, because they're done.
Yes.
Right? So they have nothing to lose, which always makes those teams a little bit dangerous. But at the same time, I always try to look at this from a coaching standpoint, right? Whereas you look at last week, you're looking at the film from the team you're going to play, right? You're looking at the Falcons. You're watching Calvin Ridley be a star.
Yeah.
And the first thing, if you're Andy Reid, is they can't run the football. So what do? Take Calvin Ridley away. Bring in the safety help. Do whatever you got to do. Slow him down. And then you pretty much own this offense. Now, what does that mean? That means Russell Gage at least has opportunities. So look, none of these things are a sure thing. Nothing is. It's football.
Right.
But in terms of if you're looking at it from an intellectual standpoint, it is. If I was coach of the Chiefs, that's what I'd be doing. Just slow down Calvin Ridley. I don't care about Ito Smith, Brian Hill, Todd Gurley's done all those. Forget it. The running game is non-existent for Atlanta. So Russell Gage to me is a guy that is going to at least touch the football and at least give you opportunity for points. And at that salary, he doesn't have to be great anyway to return to salary. He just has to get you, somewhere in double digits.
Yeah, and one of the reasons, again, why I do like Gage is because I do think that there are going to be sharp players out there who, even in GPP tournaments, are not going to want him, are not going to see the upside necessarily because of the way the Kansas City defense has limited opposing wide receivers and everything like that. So I think he becomes an even more intriguing play necessarily in GPPs. And Mooney is absolutely right in a GPP, for sure. Not cash, of course, but in a GPP, yeah, I love the call there for Mooney because I do think that there is a very, very solid chance that he's going to greatly outperform his price in a matchup against Jacksonville. Just get a piece of that game, whichever way you can. Let's go to tight ends, Joe. Who's a tight end GPP play that you're looking at this week?
This is tough. We were talking about, where tight end is just a wasteland at times. So $3,600 Goedert to me is the guy. You could try to throw a dart at Hooper or Hurst or somebody like that. I just don't want to do it. I'll take my chance with Goedert because Goedert has looked good. Yep. And I understand you look at the game log in the last 2 games, he's been under double digits, but I also have to understand that, it's a young quarterback. He's getting adjusted. He's looking Goddard's way, which is good. He's got 14 targets in the 2 games with Jalen Hurts. So that's a positive for me, but it's the price more than anything. It's a $3,600 price. It's the fact, look, he hasn't caught a touchdown in a couple weeks. Had he caught that touchdown last week, we'd be looking at a guy who would have, somewhere around 14 points. We go, oh, what an incredible value. And he would not be this cheap. So I would take advantage of kind of the slight downturn and realize that, look, it's got a little bit of loss potential in it, but that's tight end just period. So if you can get that touchdown equity, he gives you a little bit more target volume than some other guys who just offer you the red zone. So I think Goedert to me at 36 is the way I would go on DK. On FanDuel, I don't know if I want to pay down a tight end to be.
No, that's what I was going to get to. I was like, okay, I know you're talking about DK right now because again, I mean, Goedert is $5,700 on he's $300 cheaper than Logan Thomas. So the price differential between the two sites is big. Yeah, it's ugly on FanDuel, right?
Terrible.
This week,
it's terrible. I mean, you want to throw a dart on Trey Burton? It's like that kind of thing.
Maybe Austin Hooper might be my guy, frankly.
And you know what? Like I said, I get that. And if he doesn't get the tight end, you're gonna miss the pay line. If he does, great.
It's true.
But the good news is that Logan Thomas is at $6K, Goddard's at $57. Like that is basically so. If they're so close in price,
yes,
give me Logan Thomas for $300 more. I'll just bank that a little bit. I feel better about that. Again, keep the situation on your radar and see if things are fluid there. Who's playing quarterback?
Yes, we don't know
if anyone's
exactly.
getting signed off a practice squad.
You know what? I think Logan Thomas is the emergency quarterback there, so you never know.
Taysom Hill all over again for me a couple weeks ago.
All right, let's get to a DST, Joe. Now, again, every time people who've listened to this know that if you really want to fill Tag's shoes, your response should be, who's the cheapest defense on the slate? All right, give me the Jets. I'll take them because that's legitimately all he does. He says he will take the cheapest defense that he can, hopefully not.
Well, if you play a lot of DraftKings, that's something that Chris Meany and I, when we were doing the pod together last couple of years, did a lot of. And at one point, I want to say like Washington was so bad a couple of years ago, they were like 1,200. And Chris and I had the conversation. We said, you should just start every lineup this way. Right. Because as long as they don't go in the negative, you're okay. Like, it's fine. You'll be able to get so much else. And you know what? It worked. And we just kept pounding it and pounding it. Like, it was like 1,700 one week. Maybe it was, it was embarrassing. Like, it was the point where we had to kind of, do the double take and say, this can't possibly be, right? Can't be this low. But it was. This week, I'm willing to go as far down as the Seahawks at 26. Okay. Jared Goff makes a ton of mistakes. Okay.
Oh, really?
This is not new to anybody. I'm not breaking ground. But here's the thing. Akers is hurt. Yeah. You're going to go back to these other running backs. You have a situation here where very quietly, since, Jamal Adams has been back, they've been getting a lot of sacks. Okay. Yep. And Carlos Dunlap has played really well for the Seahawks this year. And I always had him in a lot of IDP leagues when he was with the Cincinnati Bengals. But Last 4 weeks, 9 points, 9 points, 12 points, 9 points for the Seattle Seahawks defense. You know, they give you a little bit of boom too on special teams. So I think at 26 on DK, that is a pretty good route to go. And on FanDuel, it's only 39. The other one that's got contrarian love for me, it's way more expensive. But I think from a roster percentage, it's going to be much less than people should have it, is actually the Indianapolis Colts against Pittsburgh. Because of the O-line issues, because of the lack of run game, because of what Buckner's been able to do. But this is also a defense that's got 12, 12, and 10 the last 3 weeks. They're playing real well. Big Ben cannot get out of that pocket. His knees do not look healthy.
Oh, no.
I'm just telling you, like, there's room for turnover there. There's room for 6 points there. There's room for sacks there. It's a lot. So that's more the ownership approach, where you pay up and maybe it's like only, I don't know, like 2% rostered, as opposed to maybe Seattle, which might be higher, but I think both of those are very viable this week for different reasons.
I do think that Seattle is the one that pops to me on DraftKings is probably the best value. On
26.
FanDuel, I might go to the Chargers, who are $200 cheaper just against Denver and Drew Lock. Like, I realize they're always dealing with injuries on the defensive line, everything like that, but just if you give me any sort of defense who can occasionally get a pass rush against Drew Lock, I'm willing to take that chance there. And if you're in a pinch, I might take the $200 cheaper. But other than that, at $3,900, the Seahawks, again, they do jump out. Just, I mean, you look, you know that there's, whether it's a 50% chance, whether it's a 40% chance that the Jared Goff that we saw against the Jets is just going to pop out. That's just what happens sometimes. And against the Seahawks, whose defense, by the way, has been playing a lot better over the second half of the season, generally speaking, they can certainly get sacks.
They're still going to give up yards. But
of course.
But here's the thing. Can they get you fantasy points? Can they get you sacks? Can they get you picks? Can they get you turnovers? Can they score? And that's the question you have to ask yourself. And if the answer to that is yes, then look at, 2,600 and you're getting double-digit points. I mean, that's an incredible return for a defense. That's what you'd love to be able to get. So, and you know what? The other thing about Goff is the times in Goff's career where he's been most serviceable were the high points of Todd Gurley and when Cam Akers looked good the last couple of weeks before he got hurt again. So you know what? Let's like if he does, he's like Tom Brady. You don't support him with a run game. All of a sudden, he doesn't know what to do with the football. It feels like no offense to the GOAT. I'm just putting that out. This is old Tom Brady I'm talking about, not vintage Tom Brady.
I get it. All right, let's finish up, Joe. Let's get to we'll do stack of the week and lock of the week. Who's your stack of the week this week?
Stack of the week is the Bears. God, I can't believe I'm saying it. But look, you got to troll Jacksonville a little bit here. And I hope they kind of show up and stay competitive because that's good for business. But Trubisky's played well. I think Matt Nagy realizes he's coaching for his job. And they very well might save it at the end. But the value of Robinson, Montgomery, Trubisky, and Mooney, if you want to pivot off that a little bit and then go save and pay up for Kelce with, by using Mooney, you can do that. And I think it's very responsible. It's the good chalk, as I like to say. And the lock of the week, I got to look at Cleveland. I love Baker Mayfield. I love Chubb. I love Higgins. Those, even Landry we talked about. I just think, I understand the Jets won last week. I get it. But let's not get crazy. They also gave up 200 yards to Darren Waller a couple weeks ago. So I don't want to go nuts here and I'll give them respect for winning the football game. Yes, they're probably better than a 1-win team. They were better than a 0-win team. But at the same time, Cleveland's smelling the finish line here, and I think it makes them very dangerous. And I think they know now the Jets are going to show up, so they're going to be ready for this and well prepared. Stefanski is going to have them ready, hopefully.
Yep, I love it, Joe. I can't thank you enough for fitting us in. You're like the busiest guy in the industry. I know it was a tight day for you. I messed up and I got pushed us a little later, so my bad on that. I couldn't appreciate more. You were fantastic as always. Remind everybody the 35 places where they can find everything you do.
Oh, geez, that's too much. Look, here's the thing. You go follow me on Twitter at JoePisapia17. You can get everything. And, by the way, the earliest release ever, if you watch it on the video version, you can see the little tile there for the Fantasy Black Book for Baseball 2021. Our earliest release, we did a pre-Christmas release this year because 2020 has sucked. So if you're playing Fantasy Baseball, is my present to the world in 2020 because it's terrible. You get the early release of the Black Book, which is out on Amazon now. And of course, you can catch me on Sports Grid. You can catch me at Line Star Pods and the Black Book Pod and spending quality time here with my good friend Dan Harris.
By the way, I realize it's a fantasy football podcast, of course. If you play fantasy football, which if you listen to this, you probably do. But really, if you play fantasy baseball, Joe's Fantasy Black Book series is awesome. It's one of my favorite things every single year. Both of them, fantasy baseball, which I am a huge fantasy baseball guy. Guys, we need sports year round, okay? If you don't play fantasy baseball, get into it this year. Do it. Get the Fantasy Black Book. It's awesome. Joe, again, I can't thank you enough. I really appreciate you coming on. I hope you and your family have a wonderful holiday season.
Likewise, my
and a
friend.
great new year. All right, we will be back. I mean, I'm going to record our regular start-sit show in like a couple hours here with the guys. So after that, we will be done until the weekend. I hope everybody has a wonderful Christmas if you celebrate it. If not, I hope you have a great couple of days, and I will talk to you soon. Looking for useful content, fantasy-relevant information, and the data that's going to help your team win? Then go ahead and subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel. And while you're at it, give us a follow over on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at FantasyPros so you can dominate all your leagues.